and all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers, and the public for comments made during the meeting, and that subsequently could be challenged in the court of law if determined to be slanderous. So with that, a very warm welcome to the first Risk and Assurance meeting for 2023. Welcome to the committee, staff and non-committee members that we have here. And just a reminder that non-committee members are more than welcome to contribute to the debate, but can't vote. So on the agenda proper, we have no apologies. We're all correct. Oh no, we saw just Councillor Winters may be in transit, so we'll just give an interim apology at this point. Thank you. The traffic is horrendous out there today for some reason. It's been moved and seconded. I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Public forum, there was no requests for the public forum for this meeting. Items not on the agenda. There are no new items to be added to the agenda. Councillor Von Dovison.
Yeah, I just think it's appropriate. I only found out this morning that Max Lewis, who's been a long-term submitter to this council, actually passed away before Christmas, and his request was for no notice in the paper and no service. So that's why we only found out today, well actually last night. But I just think we should record, because he called himself a visionary and he loved to submit, and I just think we should just the first opportunity to recognise the life of Max Lewis, who has passed.
Yep, thank you, Councillor. And we'll note that also in the minutes. A true contributor to our community. Order of business. There is no change to the order of business. Is there any declarations of conflicts of interest on items on the agenda? There are none. Public excluded items to be transferred in the open at this point. There are none, although there may well be matters transferred post this meeting, as noted in the recommendations. So we head straight on to the first report, which is the Chairperson's report, page 9, and is presented by Matt Taylor, General Manager Corporate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this report highlights the forward and the backward-looking work programme for this committee. Of course, the backward-looking work programme refers to the previous committee under the previous triennium, but the forward work programme is the tentative items that we've placed that generally will come to this committee in line with its terms of reference. But of course, there may be other items referred to this committee by full council, either through workshops or the council meetings themselves. So this is our first draft work programme, but it may well be added to as we move throughout this year.
Mr. Taylor, Matt and I have been having a conversation since late last year that as the LTP in particular starts to build up, there may well be extra work streams that are forward to this committee, particularly with a risk and finance or treasury management focus, and it's quite appropriate that we do that. And of course, all elected members can participate in that. Are there any questions, queries, or commentary around the proposed work program to date? Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. And Leon will well know that I'm raising this. Matt, the audit arrangements letter was actually on the schedule for today. If I look at page 12, and I appreciate the challenges, I would just like to reflect that I think it is important in a year that we're getting back to normal, that we should consider enabling. There's not quite enough. Sorry, I think it's important, Stuart, that we should enable you to receive and clear that letter. I'd like to think within this coming month, because it's important that we know that we have got arrangements in place, given everything has to be signed off by 31 October. So rather than hold it over to June, which is our next meeting, I think there should be some capacity for you as chair to clear that before that time.
Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, we'll allow Leon to speak to that item when he's presenting the management letter, because he will be aware of the timing for Audit New Zealand preparing that draft arrangements letter. So maybe that question in terms of timing to Leon in his presentation and then follow it up.
We have two options there. One, we can meet briefly to consider that if it's of substance, or we could have delegated authority to sign it to keep the process going. Councillor Andrew.
Yeah, I would speak in support of a delegated authority to the chair in this matter. I think it is really important that we are not the clog in the wheel, that we're actually proactively trying to help to get our audit process running smoothly as possible. So I would vote for delegated authority.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Would we expect any surprises in that letter that perhaps it won't be a surprise, that's otherwise we wouldn't expect it, would we? But I mean,
We can certainly circulate it in the first instance, that's for sure, and you'll see if there are any surprises in it. But Leon, just on that particular subject, could you just inform us, please, on what the tenor of it could be?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think it's appropriate for me to respond to this, and just do it now, and let's move on. First of all, I agree with you, Councillor. You are not the clog in the wheel. That's definitely Audit New Zealand. Shortage of auditors has been. As I mentioned before the meeting to Mr. Robertson, we're definitely getting back to normal. And instead of signing your audit report or allow you to adopt an audited annual report only by December, our aim is to get all councils done across the country by 31 October. Unfortunately, we do have some deferred audits. Quite a few of your neighbours are still being audited. That is 2022 audits. So we have to focus on that, hopefully only this month. Then we've got tertiary audits that we have to complete by 30 April, because if we start falling behind again, that's going to cause a clog again, using your terminology. So our focus at this stage is clearing old audits, clearing tertiary audits, and then going into these audits with that. And our absolute aim is to have it all completed within old statutory deadlines. To come back to the audit plan, I understand Mr. Robertson's view, because if you want to get back to normal, you have to present in February your audit plan or to this March meeting, and I agree with that 100%. It's not possible. I can't make promises I can't keep. So,
You have an expectation of a date for that to land with us?
yes, so what I said to management and saying to all my clients is that June Audit and Risk Committee or Risk and Assurance Committee is probably the date. We can try our level best to do it earlier, but I can't promise earlier. I can promise June.
Thank you for that update. So councillors, any independent chair, deputy chair, Bruce, I keep calling you a councillor. Is there any further commentary on that?
Perhaps I could become one. Look, Stuart, Leon's being very upfront, so I appreciate that. And if it is that it's got to be June, it's got to be June. My concern is this: two things. One, we probably know what the issues are. Okay, so I think a scan both of what our key transactions are for this year and their accounting implications, and a review of our accounting policies would quickly identify whether, from an audit perspective, there are any big issues. I think the second thing is that, as Leon is quite right, it's not actually an aim to sign by 31, it's a statutory responsibility. So clearly council is going to meet around about the end of the month of 31st of October. We actually have to start planning what those dates are for both Matt and his team's performance and also audit performance. I accept that Leon is should be careful. I understand Leon is in no position to make any firm commitments, But I actually think the arrangement letter at least puts down in sand probable dates for performance. And that's why I'm arguing we can have an arrangements letter within the month.
We will carry that conversation on. Are there any other questions or queries with regard to the items in the chairperson's report? If not, we do have a recommendation on page 9 that we receive it. Thank you, Te Tatu and Andrew. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Now on to 7.2, which is Audit New Zealand's report for the Bay Plenty Regional Council year ending 30 June 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to introduce this report, we're very pleased that we had our annual report adopted in the calendar year 2022, thanks to the work of Leon and his team and the prioritisation that they gave to the Bay Plenty Regional Council's annual report. So as I said, we were very pleased to receive that, and this is now the management report for that audit. So I'll just hand over to Kamaran to introduce it.
Good morning to the Chair and members of the committee. So this report is part of your usual annual audit process where at the end of the successful completion of the audit, Audit New Zealand issues a management report that essentially outlines their key findings and recommendations together where appropriate with management comments or responses to those recommendations. So just to summarize the essence of the report, there's 8 open recommendations. None of them are prioritized as urgent. 7 of them are categorized as necessary and 1 categorized as beneficial. So we have members of Audit New Zealand here available to answer any questions on their report. In essence, there was, from a management perspective, the responses either noted the recommendations and in terms of actioning recommendations that have been made, and that will be part of the work program for the year ahead.
Thank you for that, and welcome Leon, Anton and Amy at the back. Do you wish to speak to the report first, and then there may be some questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As this is Anton's last Risk and Assurance Committee for the next 6 years for Bay Plenty Regional Council, I think he should speak to this one.
Tēnā koutou, committee. Overall feedback, I just wanted to start to say, look, we completed our audit and issued a report on the adopted annual report in December. And the key focus areas were highlighted, I think, at the adoption meeting by Leon. But I just wanted to make a comment that overall the audit went quite well considering the circumstances, which was completed. We found that the council was very well prepared for the audit and everyone was engaged throughout the process and committed to ensuring the information provided was timely. This also is not only the finance team, but also the wider organization, for example, people providing information on non-financial reporting, or if we needed to, in fact, look at deeper factors around valuations, and that was very good to see. So we are pleased to say that delivery was good, and I'd just like to express our appreciation to your management and staff. The actual audit report itself was an unmodified audit report. This means that we are satisfied that the financial statements and the statements of service performance fairly presents the Bay Plenty Regional Council's activity for the year and its financial position at year end. Control environment, we are satisfied that with the internal control environment that it is effective for our audit purposes. During the audit, we identified some areas where best practice improvements can be made. However, we've noted that a significant amount of your previous recommendations have been closed. Some of those items may have been further closed subsequent to 30th of June 22, but as for our audit, we haven't specifically looked at that, and we'll look at it in the current year's audit. Areas of focus, the key focus here was the revals and fair value assessments. The only revaluation was the flood protection assets, which was completed internally by your engineers, but Opus had peer reviewed them. That was an increase of about 9.6 million. We were quite satisfied the revaluations comply with the standards and the movements were accurately accounted for. For other assets such as land and buildings, a fair value assessment was completed that included using external experts or valuers for input in that, and the work on that indicated no revaluation was required. And we agreed with that. The put option, that's also quite an interesting valuation. And the council is required to value that every year. We are also satisfied that that's been performed in accordance with their various accounting standards and the value of the liability reflects its fair value. Consolidation, you have quite a few large subsidiaries, and we made sure all the relevant adjustments on consolidations were appropriately completed and that any significant matters from the subsidiaries were reflected in the financial statements. The one highlight, which is a bit interesting, is on the non-financial reporting. The National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management, which is used to inform the results of monitored rivers and streams, has made some amendments by the Minister for the Environment in December 22. And these changes will impact how the regional councils reports its performance measures. So we have just made a recommendation. You just need to work through that and the impacts of how that will work for your 23 reports. The other area of focus is we always look at management override and internal controls, and we're pleased to report that we found no issues of concern. So these are the key points we wanted to highlight, and Leon and I are available should you have any further questions.
Thank you very much, Anton, for that. Obviously, you just touched a little bit on the group, which includes Quayside and Toi Moana. Are you comfortable with the information flow and how they are integrated into BOPRC?
Oh, absolutely,
These
Mr.
different
Chair.
entities.
Yeah, and also to mention that Quayside and the port are all for profit, and while you public benefit entities, so the different standards apply. So it makes it a bit more interesting for your management to ensure those changes are made, which we then just checked, and we were comfortable with that.
Councillor Andrew.
Yeah, can I just ask, historically, we have always found a bit of a blockage in the Quayside and the port activities coming, affecting our audit review. And it's seems to have taken up an exceptional amount of time. Not to say it's wrong or right. Have we got to a situation going forward where you're comfortable, is there anything that we can do as an organisation going forward to help to make sure that that blockage doesn't occur, so that we can smooth up the process as much as possible? So I'm asking, can you help us to help you?
Very good point, Councillor. And about 2 years ago, I raised on my management report, I would expect to see group instructions from the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to Quayside, exactly what is required, when it's required, and so on. And management did really well in doing exactly that, making it much more formal, what is expected from Quayside for Bay of Plenty Regional Council to perform their annual report. So from that perspective, I'm quite comfortable that you're doing what you can. Also regularly meeting with Quayside to ensure the information flow and that there are no surprises. As far as the Quayside audit itself is concerned, there are two big portions for me to consider. I'm the appointed auditor of that as well, and that's of course the Port of Tauranga, which is huge. And the timeframes for both those audits are extremely tight. I mean, we clear them usually by the end of August, both of them within a couple of days. As far as the Quayside audit is concerned, the riskiest thing for me, which should be in the reports to you as well, are the investments, those managed funds and the equity investments. They are risky. I know Quayside has made huge improvements in how they assess those and the information coming back to us. about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think, we had quite a bit of a problem, and we got very, very close to the line on that audit. And since then, management at the Quayside and the board has done actually really well. And we've seen even further changes now coming in with what is going to be provided to us for the 23 audit. So I'm quite comfortable. Also, just the whole flow, it's not just the port and Quayside and Bay of Plenty, because you've got different auditors as well. So we're meeting with KPMG, the auditors of the port as well, and we're meeting together as well. And it was something that was recognized about 2-3 years ago of an improvement for all of us. So, yep, short answer, yes, I am comfortable.
Councillor Catt.
The first one is about the national policy statement for freshwater management. Were there red flags to you in terms of how we were approaching this, or is this more just to be mindful that we need to keep on track of it? Were there things that you thought actually we are lagging behind with the freshwater policy? Realising that this is now historical, of course.
So Comoran will be able to probably talk a bit better about going forward, but how it was measured is how you said it in the LTP and there was no clear guidance per se, but in December the minister said this is now how it must be measured, which is slightly different to how you're currently doing it. So I suppose Comoran can talk to how that is going forward, but the way it was presented in the annual report, there was no issues.
Wasn't matched, yeah.
Yeah.
So as per the management comment in the management report, that's the recommendations made by audit has been taken on board and noted and will be factored into the work program in terms of addressing the minister's requirements.
Cool. Okay, great, thanks. And then, hang on, let me just get to the right page. Apologies. So with the procurement policy, it says last updated May 2016. I had a feeling that we have, so are there a few different kinds of procurement policies? Because I know we've got our social procurement policy. Is that separate to a general procurement policy? Are there a few ones floating around? And I thought we had a social procurement policy that was quite contemporary and up to date. And then is there something separate to that?
So three, Mr. Chairman. So we collectively call everything procurement policy, which includes elements of the policy like the approach or the guidance we give for social procurement. So the update to the general policy was done in 2016, I think it says here, but individual bits have been updated as advice or guidance or best practices developed over time. So one item that we'll be bringing to your meeting in June is to include an internal audit and an update to our overall guidance that we give for procurement, because clearly the world has moved on, supply chains, COVID has changed the way organisations like ourselves can procure and should procure. So we'll be looking to accelerate some work on reviewing our overall approach to procurement, policies, guidelines, best practice, and bring that to a future meeting of Risk and Assurance Committee. So what's being highlighted here was the procurement framework, I guess is a better way of putting it, which includes all policies and guidelines.
Yeah, great, thank you, thanks.
And also you'll note in our risk analysis that issue as well. So it's bringing parts of it forward. Was there a question on that one, Andrew, before Bruce?
I just want to clarify, just remind me what social procurement is.
It is a term that's generally used to relate to the policies and guidance you put into that reflects your communities and the people who access your procurement policies. So who do you decide to procure with, and how easy or difficult do you make? It's usually difficult. How difficult do you make it for those people to enter into procurement and contract arrangements with you? So different entities and the roles that they play in procuring with you as an organisation. Obviously, as a public entity, we have very strict rules and controls over how that procurement's done, and that doesn't always suit all entities and how they're structured and how they're set up. So it's trying to make it as flexible and fit for purpose as possible. So social procurement is a general term that's used for that.
Bruce, question.
Hey, Anton, well done, by the way. This is 6 years as manager. Yeah, well, thank you for your work. That's a good long haul, so you'll be due a rest. Anton, just probably just some rapid fire questions, but I have appreciated the report because it is, particularly as the independent here, my insight in what you're seeing inside the organisation. So I just have a couple of quick reports, questions. One is on, it's our page 20, I think it's page 11 of your actual report, which is dealing with the recommendations around the ICT policy. And the way I read that, management were basically saying we disagree because we do review annually and as appropriate. So I just wondered whether you had a comment whether we do have a meeting of minds here that our set of policies, which are in a very critical area, are actually up to scratch.
Look,
I'm happy for you to come back to us later on.
We may have to come back a bit more on more details about that, but if we were concerned, it would have been sitting in the urgent recommendations.
Well, I think my point, Anton, here is that the way I read management's comment, they actually reject what you recommend. And as an independent, Stuart, I don't have any sense of reconciliation of the two views. So I think it's worthwhile if you could come back in terms of actually how that should be looked at, because clearly as a committee, we keep things like ICT and particularly cybersecurity somewhat close to mind. And I need the clarity about, is it appropriate, our response? And I'd appreciate that. Could I just have another thing as one of the outstanding recommendations on page 36? And it's in relationship to the first recommendation there, sorry, 36 of the agenda, I think it's page 19 of your report, is the transition to the external RID. By that, I presume we still use that as the rating information database, correct? And that is still in progress. This naturally attracted me from a systems and actually a revenue security perspective. This is rating, this is our key revenue line. Are you happy with progress on this?
Leon can elaborate a bit after me, but just the reality is, just based on the timelines ideally we would have done this work as part of our 22 audit, because you would have rated 1st of July 23. But, and I know talking to Kamaran and Matt, quite a lot of work has gone in that way, but we haven't been able to test it, and that's on the work program for this year's audit. So.
Right, so in terms of doing your rates work, you haven't looked at the RID?
No, definitely not. We would have done a separate engagement last year in normal circumstances, which was just not possible. So we'll have to do it part of this year's audit.
Well, look, thanks again for that transparency. That's, again, you can see as sitting here, I'm thinking, oh, I'd like to know that my RID is up to date, because it's what we rate on. And look, a couple of really minor questions. On page 39, where you clearly make some helpful suggestions around sensitive expenditure, and you do a comparison with OAG guidelines. Perhaps it's as much a question to you, Matt. There is quite a bit there around employees being, I take it, well, sorry, I should be careful. There is a recommendation that if employees have access to purchasing privileges through council, that we have appropriate policies. Do we allow staff to have purchasing privileges through Bay of Plenty region suppliers?
There are some group and organisational discounts that are applied because there are an employee. So none that are inappropriate or relate to a conflict of interest, but there are some group purchasing that is allowed. I think for most public entities, all of government contracts, that is available then to all employees, but that doesn't in any way affect the controls that are in place or their normal role in approving or having delegated authority for separate purchases. So the items would be completely separate from their day-to-day work.
Well, thank you for that. That just makes then the observations you've had more relevant as we do the reviews, that we actually have a right. So I appreciate that. Hey, and look, you might want to send me, Anton, to correctional accounting school. I have no idea. I'm looking here at page 24. of your report, 41 of it, it talks about disclosure challenges for us. One of them was sensitivities around unobservable inputs. This is the valuation, Stuart, a big area that is right throughout the group as we have seen. What are unobservable inputs?
Well, it's around the sensitivities around these inputs that go into what are the assumptions used. And that was supposed under IFRS, which is a for-profit standard, obviously. That was expected. This flow all the way from the port, and they didn't consider it significant enough to cause a qualification, and just ended up in the letter of rep. And obviously then it just flows up.
I think, look, mate, I just don't know what an unobservable input is, and I don't know whether you can give me a definition, but we can chat about that later. I don't think I need to uphold it. Hey, Leon, just one other question. It's a comment you raised, because again, you're my eyes and ears and on the group. And I'm conscious of the general approach of Quayside, but you said their investments were risky. So automatically my ears pricked up. They are not investments in the bank, or, you know, if you were a conservative investor, you might say they naturally have a level of risk, but you're telling me they are risky, which adds a level of bite to it, as in perhaps contrast to, and I appreciate some of the issues around difficulty of valuation, getting confirmation about the reasonableness of value. But I'm just wondering, am I hearing you correct to say our investments are risky, which have a level of connotation that might force us as a public sector entity to think about those investments?
Yes, you heard me correctly, Mr. Robertson. I think we should just have a look at Quayside's portfolios, because there are some that are purely NZX and other stock exchange investments. They're not really risky, because you can clearly see what's happening. And the risky part is, to me as an auditor, if you look at Quayside's history over the last probably 12 years and how much income they've produced through those investments, and as a Bay of Plenty regional ratepayer, I'm really grateful to them, because they're obviously saving me quite a bit on rates. As an auditor, I say, where do I get the audit assurance from? That's why I call it risky, not the investment itself. And as I said, where you have listed investments, it's actually quite easy to audit, because you can see the stock exchange price. So that's takes you. But where you have investments in managed funds that are not in the open market, or other equity investments not on the open market, like startup companies, that's when it starts getting difficult to provide sufficient audit assurance to satisfy me as the auditor to be able to issue a clean opinion. Saying that, going back the last few years, we have issued a clean opinion. It just caused us extra work, which is something I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so look, I slightly beg to differ. I mean, I think what you're describing to me is exactly what I tried to say to you. The issue of valuation and confirmation and assurance is difficult.
Yes.
They aren't of themselves necessarily risky investments.
Yep.
Right. Thank you.
Fair.
Thanks for that, Stuart.
Any further questions, queries, comments around that report? Yeah, Ron.
So my one, it sort of leverages off the sensitive expenditure policy. Was there something that flagged that to you in particular? But I suppose the bigger principle is around your sense of our policy review process, because there's more than one policy that seems to be in need of review. Have you got any comments on that?
From our perspective, it is something that we'd raise. I can't see, if you look at the list, there are a few that we recommend you have a look at. It is not that we have a big concern. I can show you management reports where we have a big, no, I can't show it to you unless it's in public, in the public forum. But there are some where we have really big concerns, where these things haven't been reviewed for years. That's not the case at this council. I must make that clear.
Come on.
Just to add to that comment, it's part of the finance team's work program. We'd already identified the review cycle for some of the finance policies, and including this particular one. So this was already on the radar of the finance team to review prior to the finding being raised by Audit New Zealand.
And I think our funding and finance policy will be a key focus on our LTP. Councillor Winters.
Oh, just for Councillor Robertson, Mr. Robertson, yesterday at Operations and Monitoring, we had a very good presentation from our rates team on the new way we are collecting our rates. And I think yesterday it was 97% of people have either paid rates or they are through the direct debit. I think we're down to the last 6,000 of our 146,000 ratepayers that we are working through, and they are complex ratings that it's usually river drainage themes or something like that. So our team have spent a lot of time making sure we get it right, but we were very comfortable yesterday with our new rating information database in terms of going forward, and it's been a big shift, big work program for this council, but councillors yesterday were really comfortable with our progress to date. Bit of work to do for the end of the financial year, but on track and looking really good. I was really comfortable as Chair of Operations and Monitoring. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Before we take the recommendation, Anton, I too want to acknowledge your 6 years of having a relationship with us and wish you all the best for the future. So, councillors, we have a recommendation here on page 15 of the agenda that we received the report. Thank you, Bruce. Second, Te Is any further discussion? If not, I'll put that. All in favour say aye, against carried. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chair, just further on to the audit plan, it was something that came to my mind when I listened to Anton speak. In the management report, we've got the areas of focus for last year. I expect those to be similar for this year for the audit plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Okay, we're now on to the next item, 7.3, efficiency and effectiveness gains and progress on benchmarking. Page 44. Kamara, do you wish to present this in the first instance?
So the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an insight on some of the efficiency and effectiveness initiatives that have been planned and to an extent implemented by the organization, with the primary intent to achieve measurable gains in efficiency or effectiveness, efficiency either in terms of cost savings or quality or reliability of service, and effectiveness in terms of improved outcomes. So section 2 of the report outlines some examples that have been executed at this point in time. Also, the report covers off an update in regards to a benchmarking initiative that this council has initiated, and the philosophy behind gathering that information and the purpose for which it's intended, and the expected benefit that it'll hopefully realize as that initiative gains further traction. So just to touch on the efficiency and effectiveness topic. So back on the 14th of April, the Risk and Assurance Committee considered a report outlining the framework and the process to understand, measure and report on efficiency and effectiveness in delivering council's services. There was also a draft terms of reference presented to the outgoing committee as part of the previous triennium in relation to setting a terms of reference, which was referred by that committee to council, to the incoming council. And the terms of reference has been established through the performance expectation setting process for the chief executive. So under section 2, the report outlines some operational improvements that are primarily the responsibility of activity managers. And those improvements vary in scale from day-to-day incremental improvements in processes all the way through to more substantial reviews in terms of finding better ways of working. And where there are substantive reviews or achievements, that's reported to the appropriate committees to give council an insight as to what improvements have been realized. In addition to that, we also have internal audit reviews and recommendations arising from that, which translates to value add in terms of responses provided by activity managers to address those recommendations. So the section also covers off some key examples in terms of improvement initiatives that have been carried out by the organization, one of which is the rates collection in-house function, which was discussed to extent at the previous operations and monitoring committee meeting. The other item that's covered in the report is the in-house legal services and the savings that has realized in relation to a comparative external service and the efficiencies gained in terms of cost savings as a result of that. The other key item that is still underway and not yet fully executed is Project Insight, which is essentially a digital reporting interface that is currently in phase 1. Which is substantially complete and currently in the final stages of finalization before it is brought to council for demonstration purposes. The essence of the first stage of Insight reporting is to essentially replicate the Arataki report that is brought to council on a regular basis, which is a hard copy interface that council gets to see and a static document. What Insight 1A does, or phase 1 does, essentially is looking to replicate the financial component of Arataki with the ability to give the audience a drill down capability to go to at an activity level. So you'll not only see council's consolidated financial statements, you'll be able to drill down into the activities, and you'll have the ability to see variance explanations at a council level, but also variance explanations for key variances at an activity level. So that gives you a further insight to hopefully ask and answer your own questions based on that information and the opportunity to ask officers of that. So that's currently in development stage and fairly close to completion, and we've scheduled a demonstration of that at a future council briefing early next month. So phase 2 is essentially looking at trying to replicate the non-financial information in relation to Arataki and bringing that at appropriate time once that's completed development. The report also sets out updates that were previously reported to the committee in relation to laboratory services operational review, and also sets out further improvements in terms of rates collection service opportunities identified through the implementation of the in-house rates functions and the objectives for those initiatives for the coming year. And just finally on the benchmarking initiative, just to highlight the key philosophy around the purpose of that initiative as opposed to typical benchmarking initiatives, which looks at taking a league table ranking approach to identify comparative performances. Council staff have reached out to other regional councils and unitary authorities staff to enter into a co-design initiative to work out a platform to identify comparative information that identifies opportunities that might inform council's thinking on opportunities that others have identified that we could learn from, that could factor into day-to-day operational improvements and efficiency initiatives, and also how that might inform short-term and long-term planning initiatives that we've identified from other councils that this council would like to implement.
Thank you for that summary. I think this is a matter we've been asking for some time, particular Councillor Andrew. In that benchmarking space, and I do appreciate it's evolving, with the unitary and regional sector, will you also consider where appropriate benchmarking outside the sector, like the corporate sector, the private sector, that might add value as well?
That is envisaged as part of the future scope for the exercise. As outlined in the report, it's looking to start at a scale that's practicable and highly likely to get traction, And as we get traction and grow within the regional sector, the intention is for the benchmarking initiative to go beyond the sector and consider other entities that will help add value to identifying opportunities and inform council's thinking.
Thank you for that report. First, can I commend you on the work you're doing on the dashboard concept of so that individual councillors can get the ability to actually drill down so that we're better informed. Well, I've been using the same sort of system with public transport, and it's working really well. That ability to, without having to bother staff, to be able to get in and drill in. And I think if for us as a audit and risk and a risk and assurance committee, that ability will be greatly enhanced. So thank you for that. Keep pushing. When it comes to benchmarking, I again commend you for the work you're doing. I rabbited on about this from when I first got on council in 2004, and it's taking a hell of a long time to get there, but it is really worthwhile. And I implore you to keep pushing hard, because if you don't measure, you can't manage. And the best way, not only for our measurement, but to get comparative measurements of like-minded organisations that we can measure against, because it's all very well to sit in the tent and think we're doing a great job, but if we don't actually have something to compare it to, we don't know. And so there's huge value in that, and I know that you're working harder on it, and it needs collaboration, but please push, because we want to see this actually coming into reality soon, not later. Thank you.
Adu?
Yeah, thank you for this report. Just to build on what Andrew's saying around need to push, and obviously commitment from the others is paramount in this, but sometimes pushing too hard actually gets a reverse direction going. I was interested in your comments around comparing apples with pears might be enough. I guess that just shows that you're just coming in small first and getting the relationships going first and foremost, and building it from there. So I commend you on that. I think that strategy is very wise in an environment where everybody wants to have their own voice and their own, what I would refer to, mana motuhake, their own independence, and trying to pull that group together is a real challenge. So I commend you for your efforts and keep going.
Any other commentary, questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, once again, I found it an interesting report. I suppose, coming on, my head has been hurting a wee bit. So I look at just the big numbers. So I look at my rate bill, which is, gone up in recent years at about 3 or 4 times the rate of inflation. We're planning to have rates go up by 3 times the rate of inflation. And so and then I look at the savings, and I thought, where have those savings gone? So are they, so on that project, the saving has been made, but does the saving then gets assumed in a bit of inefficiency somewhere else? So that be interested in that sort of answer. So when it comes to benchmarking, I think Councillor Crosby is exactly right. We need to go outside the sector to see, because you hear stories, once again anecdotal, about the limited number of contractors or providers to the local government sector who have a nice deal going. I don't know if it's accurate or not. So comparing it with other sectors would be interesting. Also, bringing my experience from DHB, it's great to benchmark against others in the same sector. But what we really learned was that one DHB might be really excellent in a particular area and hopeless at something else. And so if we drill down and say what particular areas are the other really good ones good at, what can we learn from those in that area? The global overall ranking wasn't so useful because you lose things in the averages. But good start. And I'm just keen to understand, that's the other question is, are we starting projects and never stopping them? Because that's another place where savings suddenly become, in the long term, once the focus comes off them, less efficient. So those are the sort of things I'll be looking at going forward. I don't have any understanding, or I don't have enough understanding at the moment to even know if my questions have been useful. But heads up.
Through you, Chair, I can answer the point, particularly on the rate savings that were highlighted at Monitoring Ops Committee yesterday. That directly led to a reduction in the general fund budget. So the amount of money that ratepayers would have needed to pay for the rates collection if it had stayed under the previous model. So the rates increases that you're familiar with would have been 7.1 million more over a 10-year period. The cost would have been 7.1 million more over a 10-year period. So it directly leads to savings for ratepayers, and the rates collection project is a good example of that. So yeah, $7.1 million saved over a 10-year period because we're bringing it in-house.
Where my head hurts is there's been a dramatic real increase in rates overall. And despite these savings, so whereas either we've become, we're offering much more services, and that's likely, and I mean, a big part of my rates will be public transport subsidy, for instance, right? So that some of it's very explicable. What I'm concerned about and want to keep an eye on is, are we generating lower productivity? In other words, we are doing the same amount for more dollars, or less for the same amount of dollars. And so it's just going forward, I'll be looking at that as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the project Kamaran talked about, the project Insight, of allowing you to have access to information readily to drill down onto those areas of big expenditure of large programs like transport, will hopefully give you the insights to ask those questions over efficiency and cost and performance indicators and measures. So all of that being in one place for you to readily get the information that you then can take into decision making through the long-term plan. So the intention is to have that information, so when you're setting levels of service and therefore costs of service, you're comfortable with that level that's in the result of the LTP. As our current councillors are with the current LTP, you'll be building your new LTP with that level of information and detail so that you can be comfortable with the levels of service and therefore the cost of each activity. But the devil's in the detail, not the overall cost. So it will be an activity by activity discussion that you'll then have, and then you'll set those service levels, as I said, at an affordable level you're comfortable with.
Kat.
Just in terms of the benchmarking, how do you create the feedback loop for, you talk about innovation. So I'm just thinking in terms of, okay, that one's benchmarked as best practice, but then someone else innovates over here and that supersedes that. So how does that model of being fluid with benchmarking, how do you generate that so that you're not lagging behind innovation?
So the framework is essentially looking at setting a series of measures as a starting point for various activities across the councils. So the way we would look to identify that is through collaboration with our counterparts for those measures across the different businesses, establish what those measures are, and regularly report and monitor those measures. So if for one particular reporting period in a year that Council A has been the benchmark, so to speak, in regards to a particular measure and has been the reference point, if in a subsequent year another council has initiated an innovation that's actually surpassed that initial standard, the reporting will reflect that, and then redirect the group of councils as to whether there's any further opportunities to exploit that's highlighted by that council.
Right, thanks.
If I could just add something to that, Councillor White made the very important point that it is about relationships as well as the measures. So by connecting activity managers across the sector that provide the same thing in their local context, because some of those contexts don't happen at the moment. So the benchmarking and the measurement, as Councillor Van Dadelson said, will lead to the right conversations happen by people where there is best practice. Local government is very good at sharing information, is quite happy to pass on best practice, but often those connections aren't there and they don't happen regularly enough. So the benchmarking forum that Kamaring is looking to set up. And we're also doing this in the Bay of Plenty with our TA colleagues as well. So it's not just a regional sector connection point. We've started that with the CFOs here in the Bay itself, that those will build the relationships where people will share that information, because the data and the reporting will probably just give you an insight of where the best place to look, and then to have the follow-up conversation of why that would be the case. So why are you cheaper, better, faster, whatever that would be. So the numbers would tell you that story, and then the connection between the individuals who lead those activities will then lead to the insights that would then change the delivery of what we do. So we've got a lot to learn from others, and others will be coming here to learn some things from us as well.
Thank you very much, one, for the report, Kamaran and Gillian, and the conversation. We have a recommendation on page 44 that we received this. We'll move in a seconder, please. Thank you. Councillor Winters, second Councillor von Bartelsson. Is there further discussion? If not, I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, carried. Next matter is on page 51. This is the internal audit status update, and Arden's going to lead us on this.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Good morning, councillors. I'd like to take the update as read. I'd note the delivery of the audit program is proceeding on schedule. In terms of the audit action follow-ups, progress is being made. A number of the actions do require longer term solutions, and they are underway. And I'd also note that the 2025 audit plan has provision for both procurement and sensitive expenditure reviews to be reviewed in the 23-24 year. We'll bring the updated plan to the June RAC for confirmation. That 3-year audit program basically it's a rolling plan. The first year is what we're going to do next year, and the future 2 years are what we are mindful of what we plan to do, but could change.
Thank you for that. Yes, there's a good update report about what's been completed and where various projects are in play at the moment. And obviously that procurement matter is top of mind to many of us, as Matt said, with the changing circumstances. I think that's quite a priority. Councillor Winters, you have a question?
Oh, just on the ICT security. So have all councillors done their cyber security training modules as per from the last election? Because I think there was a reminder, and I'm just wondering if we're all up to speed on it.
I could potentially answer that through Mr. Chairman. So there were some councillors that still hadn't completed it at the end of January. I haven't had an update from the ICT team if there are still councillors outstanding, but I will look into that to see. But at the end of January, there still was some councillors, Councillor Winters, that hadn't completed.
Can we do a reminder to councillors that it's part of our business, and that if we get spammed or God knows what, we need to do better ourselves?
Just to comment on that, Mr. Chair, there are 4 of us who have arranged with ICT to come together and go through the process.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you for this. I'm interested in some improvements, as you say, take time and some don't. So I'd be interested in seeing the timeline for the improvements, because what really will interest me is, are any overdue or at risk of being overdue? Is that possible to generate?
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, there will definitely be some of these that will be overdue, and the timing would have changed for various reasons. So I think included in the next report, we could change the format that would show maybe the due date for those actions. Would you be particularly interested in the red and the yellow actions rather than the green, because there is a hierarchy, if you like? The red actions are more urgent than the green ones, so maybe we could focus on the red and the orange ones in terms of due date. Would that be useful if we include that in the format of future meetings?
Bruce.
Thank you, Aaron. I enjoyed this report, and certainly will enjoy the chance to have a chat when we get to the PX on the individual reports. One of the undoubted things that are going around risk committees mode is you can't ignore the events of Cyclone Gabrielle, and actually how that is actually forcing some reprioritisation around councils about what really counts. So look, my question in terms of the outstanding recommendations actually related to the BCP outstanding recommendations, which are moderate, and I think there are 6 that are outstanding. Obviously, Gabrielle has tested and is still continuing to test our ability to manage and recover or maintain business. In light of that, have we got appropriate effort and priority on our outstanding BCP recommendations?
Through Mr. Chairman, for clarification, BCP is business continuity planning.
Your emphasis, it still, I think, stands, Matt. So your emphasis is on planning, not the actual plans themselves. I think my point is, it's still relevant. And actually, have we got the right priority on it?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. Yes, so we do have a project at the moment in terms of putting those recommendations in place. What we learnt both from Gabrielle and COVID was that access to IT is incredibly important. And what we saw from Gabrielle was that when teams lost the access to electricity and IT, they had to have appropriate backup procedures in place. So that is built into what we're doing looking forward in terms of updating the plans to make sure. And teams already have that. When we go back and look at what the plans we already have. So there is sections on that, but we want to, as part of that project, make sure we have a lot more focus on that area, because that is the big lesson, I guess, from Gabrielle. So making sure that there is emphasis on that. Because like I say, from COVID, we noticed it doesn't really matter if your building disappears because you can work from home. But if your IT and it disappears, then that's a big of an issue. So making sure that the BCPs going forward are focused on that.
And thank you.
Just to follow up the point on business continuity planning, one of the recommendations that I'm aware of is to fully test your business continuity preparedness. We've had so many examples over the last year or two of actually activating for business continuity that we haven't carried out a dummy or an artificial test because the real situation has actually happened. But that would be one example of an outstanding action because we've been actually doing the real thing over these last couple of years. But that will be highlighted when we bring the outstanding actions.
Questions on that report? If not, we do have a recommendation on page 51 that we receive this updated report. Thank you, Councillor Scott. Moved. Second, Titaru. I'll put that all in favour, say aye. Against, carried. So this ends the public part of risk and insurance. Can we have a move and a second to move into public exclusion?